Okay, so it's all good sharing in the group. Um, Thanks everyone who joins us today. I want to introduce you all to Martha Hall Kelly. So thanks, Martha, for joining us. For those that don't know, Martha is the author of The Lilac Girls, which was the runaway bestseller that spent over a year on the New York Times paperback chart. She lives in Connecticut, where she spends her days filling legal pads with stories and reading World War II books. The Lost Roses was her second novel and was released in April 2019. And her third novel is The Sunflower Sisters.
Oh, that's the Australian cover.
Yeah,
It's
is it
nice.
quite different to the one that you have?
Not that different, just the type is different. It's pretty
Yeah,
cool to
okay.
see it.
Yeah. So I've recently read it and really, really enjoyed it. I haven't read any of your books before. So I know am I right in saying it's a follow-on from the Lilac Sisters? The Lilac Girls, sorry?
Um, yeah, there's three novels about Caroline Faraday's family. So
Hmm.
it's not really a series, but because there's
Yeah. But you
alone, but
definitely,
yeah,
so you
yeah, that's
definitely
right.
can read it alone. Like I've read this one without reading the other, so and really enjoyed it. And just want to say to people
Oh,
watching as well that if you ask a question during the Facebook Live, you'll have a chance thanks to Penguin. They've given me a book to give away. So please ask your questions. So thanks, Martha, for joining us. Would you like to tell us a little bit more about your books?
sure. Is it morning there in
Yes.
Australia?
Oh, and the other thing I was going to mention is that in Australia and New Zealand, and I'm not sure about any other countries, it's Mother's Day today. So happy Mother's
Oh,
Day to all the
here
mothers
too.
watching. Hope you've got
So
lots of books.
actually, it's Saturday, the day before Mother's Day.
Oh,
So we
okay, so it
share
is.
Mother's Day. That's pretty
Okay.
cool. Yeah. Well, happy Mother's Day, everybody. It's just so weird to me that it's already Mother's Day there. I love it.
Mm.
I mean, it's still light out here. I'm in Palm Springs, down in Southern California. So in a hotel room, as you can see, my
Mm.
wrinkled bed. But anyway, yeah, Sunflower Sisters. Gosh, sometimes it's good to know a little background information about Lilac Girls first. And I know a lot of your readers have read Lilac Girls already, but the way that I discovered Lilac Girls is kind of essential to understanding Sunflower Sisters. I'm just going to give you a little
Mm.
update on that, maybe 15 minutes or so, and then we'll talk about questions. But it all started weirdly on a Mother's Day back in 2000. And my mother had just passed away, which I was so, so sad. And
Mm.
I was talking to my husband about, how sad I was. And he said, why don't you go up? And it'll make you feel better if you go up and see that house you've always wanted to go see. And he was talking about the Bellamy Faraday House and Gardens, which is now a museum. And it was about an hour north of our house at the time in Connecticut. And if you're ever in Connecticut, it was a long trip, but please go see the house. It's just
Mm.
amazing, especially if you've read the books. It's fun to go see, Caroline's house. And so that's what I did that day. He said, I'll take care of the kids. We had 3 kids at the time. And I just went up there. And he knew I wanted to, because there had been uh, a article in Victoria magazine, which I don't know if they get it in Australia, but I loved the magazine. And they clipped out this 2-page spread, and it had Caroline in it, a little picture of her as an actress, and had a picture of the house and the lilacs. And so I thought, someday I'm going to go there. And he said, okay, go. So I did. And the garden at lilac time, it still is. People come from all over the place now because of the books to see it. But at the time, I was the only person there that day, and I had it all to myself. And it's not huge, but it is the authentic same garden that Caroline and her mother planted all those years ago, with lilac bushes all over the place. So it's a lovely property. And so I loved the outside tour, and I thought, I paid my $3 or whatever, it was just a fee. And I took the tour inside, and the docent it wasn't until the second floor outside of Caroline's mother's bedroom where they have Caroline's desk set just as she left it. And we were standing there, and she was such a Francophile, and she had a picture of Charles de Gaulle and Napoleon Bonaparte, and her old Remington typewriter was there. She used to fire off a letter whenever she felt there was an injustice. But there's also a photograph of 30 or so middle-aged white ladies lined up in 2 rows and posing for a camera. And I said, who are they? And she said, oh, those were the rabbits. They were nicknamed that by the Nazis when they were experimented on at Ravensbrück concentration camp,
wow.
Hitler's only all-female camp. And she had a very good friend, Genevieve de Gaulle, who made the introduction to these women, 74 of which had been operated on. They were just young girls from ages 14 to 25. And the ones that survived, because, they had terrible operations done to their legs, the ones that survived went back to Poland, most of them, and the great majority, because they really missed Poland. And they were horribly treated there as well. They traded Hitler for Stalin. So when I heard the story of how Caroline championed their cause and brought them to the United States for rehabilitation and the trip of a lifetime, I was just fascinated with that. I was really curious about that trip. Where did they go? What did they do? I knew they went to Las Vegas and a few other places. But so I started going up to the house and just studying her, because she has an archive that's under the root cellar, down in the root cellar underneath the Welcome Center when you go to the museum. And I just used to go in there and kind of just soak her life in. And I did that for a long time, 5 years. And then I moved to Atlanta, Georgia, for my husband's job. So I couldn't do that anymore. And I went through a Starbucks drive-through, usual, and I ordered a decaf cappuccino grande. And by mistake, the barista gave me a caffeinated one. And I went home and it just started coming out. I don't drink caffeine normally for a reason. My family says that I'm too crabby, which is true. But that day, I don't know what happened. It all just came out, and it was all Caroline chapters. And I had met a woman along the way, an editor, who had said, this would be a great, because I didn't really talk about it, but I talked about her for some reason. And I didn't know she was a book editor, but she said, you should write this. This would be a great novel. And I had been an advertising writer. I wrote TV commercials, but I never even thought about, I had 2 journalism degrees. I didn't think about writing anything creative. I don't know why. I just thought, oh, Patterson does that. I can't, how do you even write a novel? So I started doing it. And, sometimes it just goes to show you have to kind of not, go into something naively if it is going to be a hard, and just think, well, what the hell? I can do that. Why not? I'm going to try. But I was so almost possessed by that story. It was very weird. Possessed by Caroline. And so I started writing that, but had to, I want to write it from 3 points of view. And the other 2 view, one was a German woman, Herta. If you've read Lilac Girls, you remember Herta. She's memorable and awful. There are a few female doctors at the camp, but she was one of the few female doctors at Ravensbrück who actually operated on these girls. And then the third, I wanted a composite care of all the rabbits together, her and Natasha. So I had to go to Germany and Poland in order to do the research, which I did. I brought my son with me. I bribed him. I told him he could have 1 beer because he was 17 and it was legal in Germany. All of a sudden, he got very enthusiastic about the trip with his mom, 1 beer. And so, and I told him Polish women were very beautiful, and he was very excited. So we had an incredible trip. And, but Lilac Girls just kind of came out of nowhere. I still am kind of pinching myself, wondering, how did that happen? Because as a hardcover, it wasn't, it got on the New York Times bestseller list, but for an unknown author, that's good. But after that, as a paperback, it went crazy in this country anyway, and around the world. It's been 49 countries now have published it. So it became this like weird phenomenon. So I thought I need to go back to Random House and say, I want to write more books. So they acquired not the manuscripts, but they said, go ahead and write Lost Roses, which was about Caroline's mom. That was about Caroline's mother. She championed a different group, which were Russian women that lost everything in the Bolshevik Revolution. And then the third book, I told them, would be about the Woolsey sisters. And this was Caroline's great grandmother, Jane Eliza. And she and her 7 daughters and 1 son. And
wow.
Jane Eliza was an unbelievable woman. And since you've read it, Jackie, that she was one of those people that I would love to have met her, because I knew Caroline really, really loved her. And I never met her, but loved, really preserved that legacy. And so that would have been her great grandmother. Okay. And she was an orphan who grew up in a slave holding farm in Virginia, which is, I don't know if you know, just below Washington, D.C., our capital. And she hated slavery and for her whole life. And was brought up by her Aunt Ricketts. And they were a wealthy family, but she had no mom and dad. So she, as a young woman, moved to New York City, met Mr. Woolsey, who is very wealthy, a merchant, and they started this family up in Boston. And they had 7 daughters, and they were trying to have a son as well. He sadly was killed in a horrible accident off the coast of Connecticut. He was commuting in a steamship, the steamship Lexington, and the hull was filled with cotton, and it caught on fire, and only 4 people survived. And they perished in Long Island Sound. So that was a really hard time for Mrs. Woolsey in the 1850s, when because she was pregnant with an 8th child. And it was born after Mr. Woolsey died, and it was a boy. So I just always thought that was so tragic that they have their little Charles, the namesake, and he had died already. So anyway, that was such a wound for the family, because Mr. Woolsey was a real hands-on dad and not a Victorian kind of a father. And so they moved down to New York City, and that's where she raised her daughters, because Mr. Woolsey had a brother named Edward. And so their Uncle Edward became a big part of their family. And so they grew up in New York City. So I was so excited to research New York City, because we have a terre there. And I love New York. And so it was really fun to bring to life New York City at that period. They had wild pigs on the street, and it was a whole different thing. Farms in New York City. So that was a lot of fun doing that. But I needed 2 more characters. So I wanted to show what staunch abolitionists they were in that family. And so I wanted to have an enslaved girl, and her name was Emma, who tobacco plantation, and owned by Anne May, who was the mistress of that plantation. So that's the 3 characters. Jane Eliza's daughter, Georgie, is the one that I picked. It was hard to pick from the 7 sisters, because they're all so accomplished. But I chose Georgie because she really wanted to be a nurse, and we had no nurses in the United States. Florence Nightingale was the first one during the Crimean War, and so she was one of our very first nurses for what they called the Sanitary Commission for our Civil War. President Lincoln put that together. So so those were my 3 characters. I lived in Atlanta at the time, so I did a lot of research down there about plantations, former plantations that are now museums, and I found one that was a perfect one, and it's called Sauterley, and it's in Maryland. Now, Maryland was a border state during the war, and not to get too deeply into our war, because, um, who cares really? If I was Australian, I don't know if I would care that much about our Civil War, but it is important because during the war, there were states in the south and states in the north and border states. And Lincoln allowed the border states to still have slavery because otherwise they would have seceded and gone with the other guys. And they were so close to Washington at the time. Maryland is, practically in Washington, that if that was a Confederate state, then that would trouble, and they probably would have taken the capital pretty early. So yeah, based it on Sotterley, which is an actual place and an actual museum now, but it was a tobacco plantation, and they actually sold slaves from the deck of a slave ship there in the 1700s. So it's a pretty historic place. It has a slave cabin, and yeah. So those were my three characters, and I put them through a lot, and I took most of it from the actual letters because in Caroline's archives, she beautifully and very smartly preserved in tons of archival boxes almost 1,000 letters, and I read them all, and they're from all the different sisters and the brother to the mom. And so it was an embarrassment of riches trying to figure out which of those scenes to pull from the letters. And I started at a slave auction in Charleston that actually came from their letters. So yeah, it's full of action, and it's the third one and last one of my books about Caroline's family. So it was a little bit sad wrapping it up. But it wraps up at the house, which is a little bit of a spoiler, but it shows you that it comes full circle from that one day when I visited the Bella Verde house, and it came all the way back to that.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. That's really amazing to know all that background behind it, and especially seeing as I have read it. Yeah, that's really great to know all that. We've got a lot of people watching and some questions coming through, so that's really great. So I'll start off by asking some of the questions. So Neha is wondering how long it took you to finish The Sunflower Sisters.
Oh my goodness, that's a great question. Um, it took me 10 years to write Lilac Girls only because I kept writing things and then throwing them out because I didn't know how to write a book. And also I didn't have an outline, which was key. And so this time I kind of knew more what I was doing. And it only took me about 5 years. But it's hard to really say because I had done a lot of research for Lilac Girls already. I kind of knew the family already. So, but yeah, I'd say a solid 5 years.
Yeah. And certainly sound like a lot of research during that time.
Oh, absolutely. And not so much international travel, but I went to Gettysburg a lot, which is one of our big battlefields. And I was down on the South a lot, traveling around to plantations, but also just reading those letters took me a really long time.
Yeah,
I have to say.
Yeah. Jill's wondering if you have a favorite book that you've read.
You mean in general?
Yeah, or
a favorite book.
a favorite book, yeah. Even not just, you don't have to tell us one if there's more than one.
Oh no, I'm happy with that. I really love a book named The Tenderness of Wolves. I don't know if you've read it.
No,
by Steph Penny.
Okay.
You have read it?
No, I haven't. No.
Oh no. Okay. Steph Penny's great. She just came out with another book recently. But I love her Tenderness of Wolves. I as a gateway drug to reading when I was younger, I love historical fiction. And I kind of have always really loved Amy Tan and writers like that. And I even loved a book a long time ago called The Shell Seekers. I don't know. I went back and reread that recently. I've been going back and reading some of my old favorites. The Shell Seekers was so good by Rosamund Pilcher. And I have to say The Tenderness of Wolves is one of my favorites. The ending, I'm not as in love with, but the way that she brings, I think she was in Scotland when she wrote it, and it's about Canada.
Okay.
And, back in the 1800s. And she does such a beautiful job. I just, every time I start a new book, I go back and I reread it because I just love her imagery is really, really great. So I'd have to say Tenderness of Bolts.
Okay. Thanks for that. I'll have to have a look it up. Patricia's wondering if you have a strict writing schedule.
Uh, I do, but I don't always stay to it. I was just talking to my daughter about this because she's doing a lot of writing, and she's actually become a TikTok star now.
Oh,
So
okay.
she's having to write a lot of her own comedy and stuff, which is crazy. TikTok has changed everything.
Yeah.
But in terms of my writing schedule, I was saying I really am a morning writer. So I've been on this trip out to California, and so I wake up and at 4 o'clock, but back east it's already 8 or 9 o'clock. So I have to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and get all my writing done, because I feel like if I wait too long, I don't know, I'm not as inspired and I run out of juice. But either way, around 3 or 4, I definitely run out of steam, even back home when I wake up at 7. And I really try, I think it was Eudora Welty who said, you really should, even before you brush your teeth, get right to the writing. And I really try and do that. And then after 3, I'll do things that don't take as much concentration or that need to be in that fictive dream. I, will go online and, if I'm looking for postcards on eBay to kind of, I find a lot of ephemera and things on eBay. So I'll do that. I'll do more research after 3. And then by 5, it's time for a cocktail.
Yeah.
Naturally.
Sounds good. Jill's wondering, and a few other people have actually asked this as well, are you writing something else at the moment?
I am writing 2 things. So once I finished Sunflower Sisters, I started on one of the 2 things that Random House has acquired recently. So my next book is going to be a book that takes place in the time period that Lilac Girls left off, which is the 1950s.
Okay.
And it is I love the 50s. I mean, that's when I was born, and there's something about the cars and it's so fun to write about. But it's 2 women that survive Ravensbrück and then become Nazi hunters. They hunt down a doctor that did really bad things to them at the camp. And it's all based on real stuff. So that's been really interesting. And it takes place around the world. They go from Vienna to Rome to Paris to South America. And it was so fun during COVID we were on lockdown. And so it was really fun to at least get to travel that way, in my brain. And then the next book is a thriller.
Okay.
They're calling it a suspense novel, but
a little bit different than what you've done.
Oh, it's so fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it takes place in my house. It's a contemporary novel of one person. I've always written from 3 points of view or 2 points of view. This is one point of view in my house. And it is a scary book. So it's hard to live in that house these days. I can't go in my basement for sure.
No, that sounds really interesting. And Shelley's wondering if any of those new books you mentioned will be in any series.
Wouldn't that be nice? Yeah, I don't know. I think that the more contemporary ones have a better chance of that happening. Is she talking about like TV or?
I think she's
series?
talking more like the Lilac Girls was in a book series. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
I would love that because I think that both have potential for that. We'll just have to see what Random House thinks about that because they're the ones that are driving the car on that one. But yeah, I definitely could see sequel potential for both of them.
Yeah. And how
I left the door open.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's good. That's good to hear. Thays is saying, have you had any movie offers for any of your novels?
Lilac Girls, I did. I don't know if you know Handmaid's Tale.
Oh, yes. Yeah, very well.
Oh, you have that in
Yes.
Australia? Yeah,
Yeah.
Elizabeth Moss auctioned it. She wanted to be Herta, the
Mm.
bad doctor. And I don't know if you know Sarah Paulson. She had talked about having her be Caroline, but I don't think that's happening anymore. During COVID, everything just kind of went. So sadly, I don't know. We'll see. You know, I found that with that kind of stuff, you just kind of have to leave as a writer. You have to leave it up to the cinematic gods because they're in charge.
Very true.
But I'm hoping that would be great. I think, you know, they're making Nightingale, the Nightingale, into a movie. So maybe, and that'll be a huge hit, I'm sure. So maybe once that happens, you know, they'll come looking for, you know, other things. We'll see. You know, life is so weird. Things just come out of the blue sometimes and you don't even realize it.
Yeah, yeah. Thays is also wondering if you have a favorite character in all your novels.
Oh my goodness, that's such a good question. Wow, I really like Luba in Lost Roses, and she is the little sister to Sophia in that. She's a young Russian girl, but she's like kind of a prodigy and very funny, I think. So I really like Luba. Everybody loves Luba. And then in Sunflower Sisters, I think it's Mary. You know, there were 7 sisters, so it's a lot. But Mary in Sunflower Sisters, and she was a real person. I just get teary thinking about her. She was just such a lovely person. She had 4 little girls when, you know, the other sisters had any children, and she was married to a minister and really had a hard life. You know, back then the women did everything, and she was a poet, and a really, really amazing poet, and wrote this poem called A Rainy Day at Camp, and it went viral, what we would call that today. And every soldier, North and South, in the Civil War had it in their pocket because it talked about dying and going to God, and never reveal, because it was by anonymous and people assumed it was a man. She could never reveal that she wrote that. And it's just so tragic that she was so famous, but she couldn't say it to anybody. Winslow Homer painted a painting inspired by it. And I don't know. I just feel bad for Mary because she was, and the beauty of the family, they called her, which is so funny. I don't do that anymore. But yeah, it's just, I find her tragic, and she's my favorite, I think.
Yeah. Thanks for that. Patricia's wondering if there's any advice you could give a budding historical fiction writer.
Absolutely. I wish we had another hour because I have so much advice and no one ever wants to hear it from me, especially my children. They're like, where to start? I think nowadays, a lot of the things that are getting published in historical fiction are things like My Story from Lilac Girls and the other ones too that are based on real things. And if you can find something that is just like a little piece of hidden history that only you know, it's golden. And keep that to yourself and just write your book. And then when you query, which you have to do to get an agent, I think it's that way in Australia too. You have to have an agent, of course, that's the whole big thing, so that they can try and sell your book. It makes a huge, huge difference if you can say, this is based on a story that I have researched, I am the expert on this. And it isn't as hard as you think to find something like that and get really excited about it and then create a story around it. It also helps you define your story. So like with Lilas, for example, I knew the ending because, and I don't want to say what it is in case people haven't read it, but I knew the ending to it already. And so that gives you structure. The other thing, because I know we don't have much time, is do an outline. And you can look it up online how to do it. It's super easy. You can make up your own way of doing it, but do an outline and write in scenes, because a lot of people, and me too, when I first started, I just wrote a narrative summary, which means she did this, she did that. Or if you're in first person, you're just like stream of consciousness, write in scenes. And there's a wonderful author called Saul Stein, and he is kind of a curmudgeon-y old American writer, but his books are really, really good. And that's where I started.
Yeah.
And he talks about that and how you have to have a scene. So people are used to watching TV and you have to make it cinematic. And once an agent reads that and sees that you're writing scenes, they'll be way more interested, and because they'll know that you're a marketable entity, and that's what it's all about. It's not about you telling your story unless it's a memoir that's really interesting. It's about making a story come alive for readers.
Yeah.
So that's my 2-minute
Yeah.
counseling. But if you follow
Thanks.
that, I really, really think that's the keys to the castle.
Yeah. Thanks for that advice. And I know you haven't got much more time, but probably one more question before we finish off.
Sure.
Nalima's, I'm really interested in this question as well. Nalima's wondering if we can look anywhere for pictures about the people in your books. Can we see the historical pictures somewhere?
Sure. There's a few different places. I have a website and it's marthahallkelly.com, and there's 3 different sections to it, one for each book. And there are pictures on there. You can also go to Pinterest. And what I do when I'm writing my books, and it's I think a fun thing if anybody out there is writing, I post pictures on Pinterest as I go along. So people can kind of follow along with me. So that's a fun place to go, Pinterest.com. And if you Google, if you type in Martha Kelly, I come up. And there's all sorts of pictures on there about the real people. And so I think my website and then Pinterest are the best places to look.
Yeah.
And then you can just Google. I've done so many blog posts and things. If you Google a certain thing, a character from my book or whatever, a lot of stuff just like comes up.
Yeah, okay. Thanks for that. And yeah, thanks so much for joining us. We've had some good questions, which has been great. Could you, before we finish off, could you just let people know where they can follow you and keep up to date with what's going on with you?
Sure. I think my website I think you could like sign up for my newsletter there, but I never really send them out, only if it's something that's earth shaking. But I'm on TikTok now, which is really fun. It's very different. And I have I don't know, 40 followers or something, but starting. And you can look up my daughter, Mare Kelly, who is the one that got famous from TikTok. That would be more fun, actually. She's so funny. And then Instagram, I'm Martha Kelly. I'm Martha Hall Kelly on Instagram. And Facebook as well. I don't know if you have Facebook. For as long as, if they put Donald Trump back on Facebook, I'm going to cancel mine. But for now, it's good. And Twitter. I'm pretty much everywhere. I'm way overexposed, so it won't be hard finding me.
All right. Thanks so much. Thanks so much for joining us, and thanks to Penguin for the giveaways and organising the interview. And thanks to everyone else who joined in and the questions that were asked. So bye, everybody.
Such good questions. Thank you, Jackie. See you next time.
Bye.